Hi there. Today I am joined by a very special guest that I'm very excited about interviewing. His name is Terry Smith from Terry Smith Creations, and he is a graphic designer and potential first ballot Hall of Famer in the NHL for design. This guy's been around the block, and we love what you've done. You're most famous, most likely, people know you as the designer behind the Sharks logo for the San Jose Sharks, but you've also been involved in so much sport logo design across many different sports. You were involved with the redesign of the 2017 logo for the Sharks. You're also been involved heavily with the influence and design in their affiliates like the Barons, the China Sharks, and the Worcester Sharks, and the San Jose Barracudas. So your fingerprints and DNA are all over the Sharks logo, and it's so great to have you on to talk about that today and just about you as a designer in general. So thank you so much for coming on, and please say hi to all of our hockey jersey addict listeners out there.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully here to answer questions. I know there's a lot of questions sometimes behind these things. So uh, nice to meet all of you, and look forward to sharing some thoughts.
Well, thanks again. And I think where I'd love to start is just how you became involved with you and your team being the ones that were decided to start the design and logo for the expansion San Jose Sharks in the early 1990s.
Yeah, I mean, my background in art, besides doing, logos and designs, I really started more as an illustrator. And a lot of the art I was doing at that time, I was doing a different take on sports art. It's something I called
Mhm.
sports fantasy. There's a lot of that that people can see, that's out there. Probably most notable if any of your fans out there or people watching, if they collect, sports cards, we were was one that designed like the Provision line for Fleer. So that was
Nice.
football, baseball, and basketball. And there's a number of different things. As we get into it, I can tell people where they can see more work. But I started as an illustrator, and I was at a sports marketing conference in San Francisco, and they had asked me to speak. I had samples of my work there, and I was talking to them about sports marketing and different approaches that people could take. That was different at that time because back then, sports art. If you go back and look at sports art from the 50s or 60s or even the 70s, you tend to get like a portrait of a guy's face and then maybe three action shots around it.
Right. Yeah.
Most of you probably recognize what I'm describing. And what I do is sports fantasy. In other words, I treat the athletes as if it was, issue number one of a comic book. I treat them a little bit more heroic. I try to have each image tell a story. And so we do something different. And so after seeing some of the work and all that kind of stuff, some of the people who were in the audience, there were a couple of people in the audience who were involved with what was called Bay Area hockey at the time. A lot of people didn't know about it, but they were the group that was scheduled to bring, the NHL to the Bay Area. And at that time, the team didn't have a name, and they were, a place to play or any of that stuff. So it was pretty early on. But afterwards, they came up to me and said, "Hey, have you ever done logos for teams before?" I said, "Yeah, I've done a few. It was minor league stuff and different things here or there." And they said, "We'd like to, see what you would do, for us with this new team we're bringing to the area." So that's kind of how it started.
Very cool. And I know a little bit about the graphic design process from being involved with it myself in the corporate world. I imagine you have your own approach, and sometimes you're given the name, sometimes you're allowed to input on the name. Sometimes you're allowed to influence the color choice, other times that's decided for you. So once it became apparent that you were going to be working with the, can I call them the Sharks organization then? Who knows? But at that point, were you also, being involved with the naming and the focus groups, if there were any, and the color palette choices?
Yeah, at that time, there were names that were being bantied about. They were trying to figure out what to do. They also wanted the involvement of the community and people in the Bay Area. I know at one point they had done a contest, to try to get, ideas for names and so forth. But there were a few, names that, a short list that they were kind of throwing around out there. So yeah, we did have some input on that. The one thing I will say on that note is in sports, um, there are a lot of teams and leagues that when they come in, they try to get, in my opinion, a little too cute, and they try to pick esoteric names. Things like, I remember the old USFL, they were picking things like the Sun or the Bell. You think of you have a team in hockey, the Wild, things like
Right.
that. When you pick those types of names, they are, in my opinion, a little more difficult for people to rally around, because when you say something like wild, what does it mean?
Sure. What's a
So
Guelph storm?
exactly. So in those cases, what you create really becomes the identity of the team, and you have to kind of make up a story, if you will.
Mm,
Whereas if you pick something that everybody knows, a lot of times I believe that's an easier rallying point. That when people can see it, they can identify with it a little more quickly, and you can do a little bit more with it, because you can take preconceived notions and ideas, and people bring an idea to the table when they hear the name, and then you can play off of that. So to that extent, yeah, I tried to move them away from some of the names that they were thinking about that, like I said, I considered more esoteric, so that I had something I felt stronger to work with.
and that's a strong point there too, that maybe the number one voted name, when it's meant to go to a public vote, it's a great name, but how that then translates into the design process as it relates to workable logos, possible colors, and just overall potential. I see your point about choosing a name like Wild versus Shark, which is already got a little bit of a story behind it, and you can play off those connotations instead of trying to create a backstory to then involve those as connotations. So, on that note as well, I mean, when I think shark, I think more like, I definitely think aggressive, and I know that you are a fan of creating logos with a story behind it, but I also know that you were campaigning more for that blood red color. Yeah, here's a sports team, here's an aggressive team. Let's play off of that and go with this blood red color. And then it's clearly not blood red. So how did that happen, and how much of one of the owners being a fan of the Miami Dolphins do you think maybe had a influence in that teal choice? Curious
Yeah,
there.
whenever you're doing logos, again, colors, logos, they're all personal choice. There's no right or wrong answer. It's not math. It's not black and white. It's very gray. So opinions are going to matter. So depending on, I've done logos, over the years where um, an owner's son or daughter makes the decision, an owner's wife makes a decision. It's the owners, it's their teams, they can do what they want. All you can do is try to, offer guidance and suggestions and things like that. When it came to the colors, I knew I was doing something that was non-traditional. So, when you think about sometimes solving a problem in this particular case, the question becomes, how many new things do you want to introduce to an audience,
Okay.
right? So we were already I knew I was, we were doing something that was very new and different in terms of logo itself. So that was, hey, if people didn't like it, that could be strike one. Now we're going to introduce a color, that by a lot of people's definitions, the original colors were, they might have been a little feminine, as a, the color teal. So, would the guys want to wear it and all that kind of stuff? So now, and it's not traditional and so forth. So now you're introducing potentially a second strike. So it's one of those things where you kind of evaluate. When it came to the colors, again, you also want something that's going to stand the test of time. So
Yep.
sometimes, if you think about, colors like, and you've seen them in sports where some teams may have lime green uniforms, or they might have these bright, in our case, teal or things like that. And then those colors go out of style, right? And the team has to switch colors. So one of the things you're looking at when you're doing these things is, hey, can I come up with a color that, again, the team won't want to change, that will stand the test of time? The other thing is you look at colors that make sense for the organization, for the name, all that kind of stuff. So when I thought of sharks, yeah, my initial thought was, yeah, blood red. What we ended up with is Pacific teal, the ocean and blue. So both of those two colors made sense. It was an idea of, okay, how many, like I said, how many new things do you want to introduce into the market? And so again, knowing we were doing something different with the logo, my initial reaction was, hey, maybe we should lean this way. The other thing you had to look at was manufacturing. At that time,
there is no teal.
There was no teal. So all the manufacturers probably wanted to string me up. They actually had to go out and dye the lots and make the darn things. All the T-shirts and all that kind of, it just was not a color that, manufacturers, whatever they may be, whether you were a licensee or a uniform manufacturer, gloves, all that kind of stuff. I mean, who had teal? So, when it came to colors, yeah, as it turns out, it was it ended up being a good decision in the sense that, and you can't predict how popular a logo will be.
Sure.
But because it was so popular, everybody got on board pretty quickly because they were selling, right? It was making money. So if I make these shirts, I know I'm going to sell them. And it also meant that, we stood out in the marketplace when it came to sports, because the Miami Dolphins at that point had switched to more of an army green color than a teal color.
Mm-hmm.
So we really were the only team in the market. I think when the Charlotte Hornets first came into the NBA, I think they had some teal and purple in there, but it wasn't a color that was used very much, and it wasn't the primary color of any team at that point. So it ended up working out in our favor.
The other thing I'm curious about there, and back to that part about design practicality a little bit and potential, when you heard teal and when it was going that direction, were you immediately concerned about how the cameras in the NHL were going to pick this up with the issue of non-photo blue potentially like messing things up for them? And were you trying to like ahead of time warn them about that? Or were you then like, okay, teal, and now let's work on a teal color that's going to work on camera?
Yeah, no, again, once the decision was made, those were kind of my two primary choices. We had done some other things, some of the earlier designs, there were greens, there were reds, there were blues, different shades, but once, most people were getting on board with the teal color, then you focus on that. So I didn't think much about it after that. When it came to worrying about television, I think not in the beginning, it was about, hey, can we find, a color that works.
Gotcha.
And, that would happen. I think if I'm thinking about my Pantone colors, I want to, for some reason, 1, 3, 4, 5 sticks in my head. That might've been the original teal color. But, it wasn't until after the fact that, the television concerns came in. And you have to remember at that time, and when we did this, I mean, the NHL really wasn't on TV. Even to this day, the NHL doesn't have the television contracts that, the NFL and NBA and Major League Baseball have. So it was a while really before, that kind of hardcore television market came into play. But, from the most part, that didn't come up till later. And they didn't change the colors of the uniforms or anything for a while. They ended up going to a darker blue at some point, but that was after the jerseys went to Nike instead of CCM. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you guys are jersey folks, so you'll know what I'm talking about here. But when we did that, CCM made all the logo, all the uniforms for all the teams. And it wasn't until Nike switched, and you guys probably know a little bit more of that history between, the manufacturers kind of wrestling over who got to make the jerseys, and that whole story. But Nike was the one that ended up switching the colors, and also when they went to those next jerseys, Nike also took over the uniform design. So the jersey that you have on was, again, one of the original ones. But when they made that switch, Nike also said, we're going to design the uniforms as well.
Yep. And I mean, just a little bit more to comment on like that influence. And back then, the NHL wasn't really on TV. Back then, too, there was no like the league operated a lot differently and how you could make money and what things were preventing you from making money. And you talk about the teal being an influence. I believe that had a significant impact on just women being involved with the sports side of hockey as fashion, because they were starting to see more women buy this logo than other teams in the past. And that led to eventually down the road, the NHL kind of recognizing that we can make more form-fitting things for women as well, correct?
Yeah, there was the logo did a couple of things. Number one, the biggest thing was at the time when we did that logo, your audience is probably familiar with what NHL Properties is.
Yes. So
Marketing arm. And so
that's the thing I love about this story is, please tell it, because it's fantastic what you did because of how awesome this logo was.
yeah, so right now the way all the leagues work is there is a properties division or a licensing arm of every major sport. And so in the NBA, it's NBA properties, NFL has NFL properties, et cetera. And what the properties divisions do is all the owners basically split the revenue derived from anything with uniforms, anything with team logos and all that kind of stuff on. At the time we did the Sharks logo, NHL properties didn't exist, which meant that each team, if it was a Sharks logo, the Sharks got the money. So, when you think about it back then, merchandising and all that stuff was a primary source of revenue, for an NHL team. It might mean the difference between being able to sign a player or not.
Right.
And if you think about it that way, none of the other teams were really making enough money where that mattered. Well, the Sharks logo I think it ended up being like number 2 in sales in all sports in North America. It's just to
behind the Bulls.
The Chicago Bulls, was more. So it meant that's revenue. Now they could decide what to do with that. If they wanted to sign players or whatever they wanted to do. But the bottom line is the other owners didn't get any cut of that money.
Yep.
And the Sharks, again, being out west, there's only one other team out here, was the Kings.
Right.
And so again, what the mark did, number one, was it kind of changed the way that the league's approach and their thinking about, logos and colors and merchandising. For us, what it meant is I was just trying to really come up with something that would appeal to our home market. At that time, again, hockey, most of your merchandise can be sold in the home market. So I was more focused on, who our audience was going to be. And I figured for a sport like hockey, which is very addicting if you go to the sport, it still doesn't translate well on TV. But if you're there, I figure, again, we're going to get younger audiences. We've got surfing out here. We've got X game stuff, skateboarders, this was a different market. And so I was trying to create something that would appeal and sell in our market, which was both, really, if you think about how large California is, we're looking from the
significant.
Yeah, it's huge. And so I'm looking at, San Francisco, San Jose, all the way down. I mean, it's such a large state. And I knew if we did something, we could also crack the LA market because they have a team there. Again, people are going to be aware of hockey. So bottom line was, it just meant that, by going with teal, it was something was different, but it was something that would definitely appeal to, audience out here. And when you talk about women, again, one of the things, to note is, who buys most of the clothes in the household?
Right.
It's
women going out. Yep.
That's right. So, when we first started, I assumed we would have more of a male audience and that our Black merchandise would sell more. And the way it turned out, there was a lady named Mary Keene who was running the Sharks merchandising. And, Mary accurately predicted she ordered more teal than black. And I kind of look at her like, are you sure? Yep. And sure enough, they had a store, I forget the number, but it was a crazy amount of money they were doing on a daily basis in their stores before the team ever even played a game.
That's what's amazing to me about this is just the craze that happened as a part of it. And I have other theories as to why that's also true. That I know you've also kind of elaborated on as well, but I just find that whole effect went from just, that year before the like the Sharks enter the NHL, the amount of revenue they do is about the same as 3 times more than the next team. It's crazy. And then the global effect that this has is you're starting to see hats all over in Europe. I remember as a kid, I was the guy who got the Mighty Ducks jersey as well when they came out, but this is, and I remember my first hockey bag being a Sharks hockey bag, and like the team wasn't existing yet. And I know there's pictures of hockey players on the Sharks now that are wearing stuff back then, like Brent Burns in a school photo, Logan Couture at a birthday. And it's like, man, this logo was everywhere growing up, and it was hard to ignore it, right?
Yeah, again, if you think about, whenever I do anything, what you have to do is stand out in the marketplace. The sports marketplace, even back then, is crowded. If you think about, because it's not just other hockey teams you're competing against. What you're
Right.
competing against is all the other sports stuff that's available to people. So if you think about minor league hockey, minor league baseball, the NFL, Major League Baseball, all it's a crowded space. So if you do something that is not going to stand out, you're just going to get lost. And so I think part of that success of that, on a global scale, was that it was different enough, and also it told the story. And again, there are very few logos that tell the story. So I don't care if you're in Europe or wherever you might be, the color's going to be different. And hockey's an aggressive sport. And this, one of the things the league didn't like about it was, we were taking their the tool of their trade and
Yeah.
I'm not going to say desecrating it, but we were having it broken in half.
Right.
And I think that what that also did, though, think about it. If you don't know the sport or what you think you might know, it doesn't matter. Everybody can relate to what that means. I've got a shark, they bite things, and here he is breaking the stick. And so the logo spoke to people. Here's an aggressive sport, and this is cool. And it's not something that would normally be done. And you've probably heard some of the interviews I've done earlier, but I said that logo would never exist if you were designing logos today. They're all done by committee. They all have to go through all these approval processes. They all have to go through the leagues, all that kind of stuff. And there's no way this logo would have gone through the league at that time. So if we had tried to do this even, 5 years later, this logo would not exist.
I believe that too. And it's kind of sad that the collaboration process has gotten more corporate that way, because your logo is voted the best NHL logo of all time in 2015 by the Hockey News. Like, and now that we know the process behind that, it seems kind of criminal that they're putting a little bit of a handcuff on the designer. But as a designer myself, and wanting creativity at all costs, like I completely feel that way. But another reason why this was, like, I think to your point, is because this logo at the time, and you're trying to tell a story at the NHL level, you don't see a lot of like animated or cartoony looking logos. And now you don't. Down in the minor leagues, you certainly see a little bit more creativity that way. But at the time, it seems like the Sharks logo was taking a big risk in breaking away from the traditional, more shield approach and adding a little bit of personality in the shark with that aggressive biting of the stick and just the animation in general. And I see that also in the fact that you are using a triangle behind the shark to kind of convey motion, right? And so I feel like that logo is just a perfect blend of what you were experimenting with that other people weren't doing at the time, but also giving it like that aggressive and mean approach instead of like a more comical approach that I think people were kind of expecting if you say animate a logo, right?
Yeah, if you look at the original design, obviously we've come back and we also did the redesign for the new one. But the original one, there's two things you're just trying to convey in a very, very quick way: speed and power.
Mm,
That's hockey, speed and power. Yes, there's a finesse to it, but it's not what a lot of people think about back then when they thought about hockey. They thought about speed and power. Now, Gretzky, man, that was just pure grace. But for most people, those were the two things they thought about. And so when you see the mark, that's really the first things you see. By having it break the triangle and come through the triangle and the angle, we're trying to say speed. By breaking the stick and biting it, we're trying to say power. So it's very, very simple. It's a very, very simple, easy message for anybody to understand, and it's not confusing or anything like that. The other thing is when you look at the shark design, it's not a shark. It is a symbolic representation, of a shark, because
right,
that's not what a shark looks like.
right.
But a shark is not, from an artistic standpoint. I used to tell people it's a cigar with teeth.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and you've got this dorsal fin, which is what most people see. So, when we did the first one, and there were two other designers. Actually, one other designer primarily was working with. There's an artist named John Zalesnik,
Hmm.
and he's kind of a fantasy sci-fi, illustrator, and I'm an illustrator. So both of us have illustration background. But the idea there was, just to try to come up with a, stylized graphic representation, of a shark. And then the idea of, creating something that, again, get the idea of aggressiveness, is kind of where that came through. So, I credit John with a lot of a very, very heavy influence on that basic look. When we came back and did the second design, I have another artist that is part of our crew that we work with quite a bit. An artist named Norman Felkley, who's
Yeah.
kind of comes more from a comic book background.
Mm.
And again, also, illustration, all that kind of stuff. So when we set out to do the next version, what we wanted to do was make the shark appear a little more 3D.
Yeah.
And we also wanted, because in the main logo, the only teal in that main logo is the little stripe that runs inside the
Yeah.
triangle. Otherwise, there's no teal.
Right.
But teal had become such a predominant color for the team that
They're
we
screaming
wanted to bring
for it.
more teal into the primary logo. And so what you see on the second version is we use the teal to kind of give the shark a little bit more dimension. The
Hmm.
other thing I wanted to do is bring out the aggressiveness in the second one. And so you see the eye goes from being just white to, now we take the stick color and we pop that into the eye, make him look a little more evil, a little more aggressive. And then we went back and, simplified things. So the second version is, yes, it's graphic, but it's a little more representative of a shark. And then on the third versions, on the more recent versions, people wanted to see the teeth, because, even on the first ones, yeah, you kind of get the sense of it. But when people think about a shark, you think about the mouth open and taking a bite. And so the newer stuff that you see, again, that's where we start getting into, seeing the mouth being open, which was quite a challenge. But we went kind of from a stylized shark to more of a 3D shark. But also when we went to the 3D shark, the team, you never saw the full shark.
Right.
And so that's where the alternate jerseys that first came out were the first time you saw that, what we call the leaping shark, when they came out with their black jerseys, where you actually saw the full shark. You didn't see the teeth yet because that didn't come until a couple of years ago. But the idea of there was a evolution, if
Right.
you will, to not only the logo, but then the interpretation of the logo and the interpretation of the uniforms. So yes, I, designed the first ones. And then, like I said, once Nike took over, they went through a whole series of iterations before, and then the team was sold, and that new ownership group brought me back in to redesign jerseys and redesign logos and things like that. So I did a few more after that, and then team was sold again, and I have not been as involved. The last thing I did was their third alternate jersey. The last couple, we've been
Mhm.
involved with a little bit.
And and I mean, that's a significant history with the Sharks organization specifically, and then you were also influencing a lot of their minor league affiliates as well. And then something else that kind of came up in what you're talking about that I was curious about was also sometimes it seems like these designs get made and then get put on the shelf and can get resurrected a little bit later. And if I understand correctly, like some of the earlier concept art for what the original Sharks logo could have been is now closely resembling what the China Sharks and Barons are using today. Is that right?
Yeah, some of those earlier designs. Yeah, so you talk about a more cartoony approach. I think at the time we were working on the Sharks logo, I think the Penguins still had their more cartoony look before they went to
Hmm.
the more design oriented penguin in the triangle.
Yeah.
Before they had more the cartoony penguin that was skating.
Yeah, I actually like that one a lot.
Yeah, so but that was one of the things that the Sharks didn't want to go down that path. That's one of the reasons they leaned away from that. But that the shark that you see for, I think it was used for the, I believe it was used for the team in China. Um, there was a version of it with a monocle and
And a
top
top
hat
hat
that
for
was
the
used for
Barons.
Worcester. Um,
Oh, okay.
and then there was a almost like a W with a shark fin that was used for, I believe that was also used for Worcester. Um, and then there were a few other things that were done, here and there. But one of the things, for if people are interested in seeing some of that stuff, on December 10th, I'm partnering with eBay, and we'll be releasing. People, you'll be the first to hear. Your people will be the first to hear about this. But there are a lot of people that collect my artwork and want that. And I don't release it usually ever. So it'll appear on baseball cards or a poster or a media guide or something like that. But with eBay, I'm releasing a catalog that normally, a TSC catalog, which so Terry Smith Creations,
Okay.
TSC. Normally these only get sent to, companies like Nike, Adidas, or Teams, their catalogs of work, where we're talking to them about projects. But we're going to release a small number of them. And in that catalog, there are, I think, 3 pages of Sharks logos.
Oh, cool.
So you'll actually be able to see some of the stuff that didn't get used.
Oh, that'll be so
But
awesome.
but over the years, we've probably done a couple hundred logos.
Wow.
And again, most of them, I'd say out of the 200 we've probably done, and I'm sure there's probably more than that, maybe 15 have been seen.
See, that's the exciting thing about what you just said is I just know there's so many other possibilities out there, but at the same time, you're trying to keep it to its traditional look and feel. Like, don't fix what's not broken type situation. And public opinion and design subjectiveness always makes it really difficult to know, okay, I finally am ready to release that logo and take a look at it. But man, that's really exciting to hear because I know there's been some really off the board ones that were like more like maybe when it was the sharks, it was more like a tiger shark with like a lime green pattern to it and stuff like that. I've seen them
Oh
some
yeah.
weird stuff out there, and I'm just
Oh yeah.
like, oh, there's
Yeah.
got to be just so much.
Yeah. Now that one you're talking about, is one we actually did, way, a long time ago, before the one you're wearing. So there's a version of that shark, but it's because one of the names being thrown about was tiger sharks.
Right.
And so we were trying to do, again, something very different. So yeah, you've probably seen it, and maybe maybe you've got a copy of it somewhere. But yeah, that one's crazy. It's got black, it's got lime green. There's a tiger stripe pattern on it that's moving through the triangle. The uniform itself has these kind of weird tiger stripes on it. Yeah, there was some very different stuff.
Definitely.
That was tried. But at the end of the day, like I said, when you're doing these things, I don't, I'm not a big internet person. I don't follow any stuff. But whenever you're doing these things, I mean, half the people are going to like it and half of them aren't. When we first came out with the logo, people associated with hockey hated it. The league didn't like it. Traditional hockey people didn't like it. It was too different. But we were in a different market. So in our market, it was working. And, for most of the rest of the people outside of hockey, it worked great. And I think over time, people who were in hockey, especially the younger people in hockey, they liked it. And so what you had was an institution, like a lot of sports, right, that are steeped in tradition. The people that run those organizations are the last people that want change. We're seeing a little bit of that in our country today, right? Mm-hmm. So on social causes and social justice, people want to keep the system the same, and sometimes the best thing is making change. And in this particular case, the logo, I think, helped bring about change. And I'm hoping that in the same way, the reason I'm doing more of these interviews, because normally I don't, is I'd like to see more diversity in hockey. I'd like to see, the sport start to change in that area as well. So hopefully it will work. But I'll make one other point. When you think about all the soccer logos that you see, mm-hmm. I look at soccer and I think soccer is still, in the same place where hockey was, right? Soccer is all about these shields.
Right.
And you don't see anybody that steps out of that norm.
Yeah.
And so what you get is this kind of repetitive feel. It's going to have a, flag-like coat of arms, crest, and that's traditional soccer. And so the people running the organization, that's soccer to them.
Yep.
And that's a sport. Think about it on a global basis. If you came out with something very, very different for Manchester United, just something different, it would probably hit a home run just because it's different. And in that way, I think the Sharks logo may have, when you talk about your theories, I think, one of the things is, again, sometimes change can be good.
One of the big mantras of this podcast is there's no jersey too big or too small, too new or game worn, too loud or too proud. Like we love and embrace all the designs that are out there. And that is a theme that we like to promote on this podcast as well. And just because you hit on the topic of diversity, I think it's important to mention that, players like Evander Kane in the San Jose Sharks organization, who's a big member of the Hockey Diversity Alliance, is doing the responsible thing by telling the NHL, look, we don't want to be affiliated with you right now because we understood it was a great partnership out of the gate, but so far your efforts have shown more that it's just a publicity thing than trying to actually enact real change. So while Kane knows that there's support through the NHL, he doesn't want to be associated with people that aren't doing the proper actions that he feels are necessary. And
yeah, I think that it's just like anything else, there are people, behind the scenes who are, working to make that change, but just like in our country, the racial issues are, they're institutional and they're systematic. And when they're that deep, they take time to change, but you have to point them out. You have to continually point them out, and you have to continually work towards that change. So hopefully, that will be happening. But the sport itself it sounds like you played. it's an expensive sport. So you see this in a lot of sports.
Yeah.
Hockey is not a country club sport like golf or tennis,
Mm.
but those types of sports and institutions, um, it is difficult sometimes for people of color to have access to those types of venues and equipment and all the other types of things. So hopefully, um, there'll be programs and people trying to make those types of things happen and make these sports accessible.
I completely agree, and I'll plug one right now. Black Girl Hockey Club. It's a nonprofit, and they actually have scholarships open right now for any Black women looking to get involved, either with a support for playing a full season to just needing equipment or going to a tournament. And
Yeah.
they're partnering with some amazing organizations. I believe around the same day that you'll be releasing things on eBay, they're partnering with the Erie Otters and doing an awareness night. So I'm really, really encouraged by what's happening. And I also really look forward to trying to talk to Blake Bolden, who's part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion panel with the LA Kings. And
Yeah.
they do a lot of diversity nights too. So,
Yeah, and I have some ideas. So I'm hoping, there are a couple of those organizations that I know they're trying to bring about change, and some people that I know I've started to have some conversations with. So hopefully, I'd like to do some designing or do some things that can help that cause as well. So hopefully here in the near future, we'll be able to do a few things. But yeah, if Black girls, for hockey, hey, I'd love to design that uniform for them.
hell yeah. Yeah, there you
We
go.
could have some fun and bring about some awareness. So, I'm sure over time, if I do more things like this, more people will know, yeah, that, I'd love to be involved in some of those things that help some of those causes.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And we certainly want to support that too. So we'll be making sure to let Black Girl Hockey Club know that.
We'll
And
be
then,
able to do it together. And then you can take their uniforms on your show.
yeah, trust me,
And,
there's,
and just like
I
we're talking
don't,
now, some people are going to like them and some people are going to
right.
hate them. At least don't be talking about them.
Yeah, that's true. And it's not like I need a really strong reason to buy a jersey, but that would be a very strong one. And, Terry, we are coming to the top of the hour, and I really want to thank you for being on. But I do have just a few quick questions I wanted to throw at you, and I'll try to segue this into, we're talking about diversity and what's going on behind the scenes. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the logos and what's maybe hidden in there behind the scenes. One of the things I think I figured out is, people want to try to pick apart a logo when they really look at it and try to dissect every single detail. And one of the things I got kind of obsessed with is numbers and if they have any significance. And I looked at something like the New York Islanders logo with the 4 stripes on the stick, and that means 4 Stanley Cups. And I look at the stripes on the stick or the amount of stripes in the shark teeth, and I'm like, nope, that was probably more to just help protect against counterfeiting. So is that more like the design that went into that one?
Yeah, again, when you start working on these, what you're trying to do is you're trying to solve a problem visually. And as I told you before, the first, it's what are you trying to say? Well, speed and power.
Mm.
And then, like I said, on the next version, it's okay, we want to say speed and power, but move it from 2D to 3D, right? On the last versions, again, now we need to open the mouth. So one of the hard things was when you take our original design and you open the mouth, it doesn't look like the same shark. And
Right.
so that, I became obsessed with going, how do I open the mouth on this stylized shark that we have and still have it look like a shark? And that's where, again, the design starts to break down from the standpoint of this really doesn't look like a shark.
Right. Right.
It works for what we were trying to do at this angle and all that stuff. But once you change the angle and start opening the mouth and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't look like it's in the same family as the mark you just did. So with that being said, you really don't get into um, trying to put hidden messages or things like that when you start these things out. Now, my paintings are completely opposite. There's
Okay.
always different
Nice.
stuff that you got to look for it. So every now and then, yeah, I'll do it in logos, but I usually don't tell people which ones I do it in and which ones I don't. Part of it is that's the beauty and the fun
Oh,
of
totally.
doing this, and that is logos are very personal things, and like I told you, there's no right or wrong answers. So I never confirm or deny any of the conspiracy theories because I want people to read into it what they want. I want them to make up their own stories. Um, that's when it's important to them and it's personal to them. And again, they're fans, fanatics, right? So you're always gonna have disagreements. That's what's the beauty of sports. Which player was better? Which color was better? Which uniform do you like better? That's what sports is. So if I answer those kind of questions, I think I ruin some of the beauty and the fun of sports. So that's a long-winded way to say no comment.
Yeah. Hey, that's fine. I actually think that helps our debate because now like, in it we're online and we're talking about all these theories and I'm like, you know what? Screw this. We're gonna have the designer and settle this once and for all. And it's like, actually, we're not. We're just gonna get a more diplomatic answer as to why we continue to debate about it. Because I think one of the more obvious ones is in the new design when you add teal to the actual shark, people want to try to see an S and J in the top of that shark. And I know it's been pointed out to you and highlighted, and I know your answer on that is what you just gave. So I won't bother you with giving a more diplomatic answer than you already did on that one. But I'm wondering if you've heard about this other one. I don't know if it's like this where it's like, Terry Smith, you did the Sharks logo. Oh my God, do you know this? Kind of like when an actor's like, oh, I loved you in that movie. But the one I wanted to come running to you with, and like now I know I'm not getting an answer, but I just
You
have the
can ask
privilege
it.
of having you on video. So I get to see your reaction and when I say this, but I can't help but notice like there's a couple similarities between the Penguins and the Sharks logo in terms of you even alluded to like comparing it to the penguin that's skating and we didn't want to go that far, but that triangle's there to convey motion, but that triangle also is indicative of the city of Pittsburgh. And this triangle that you have is to convey motion, but I think what's also going on, especially on the like when you're looking at the logo on the left side, it conveys to me this area of the bay called the Red Triangle, which is shark infested. And when you draw this red triangle off the coast and superimpose the logo over it, the eye and the triangle almost line up to the red triangle of shark infested waters and the eye of where San Jose is located. So I think that's really, really cool. I don't know if that's a super duper uh, like coincidence, but as someone who, after just looking at jerseys forever, then looks past the jersey and starts looking for meaning, I wanted you to at least be aware of that one. And for the people not seeing this and just hearing this, he's smiling and nodding. So I'm not going to look into that.
What I will tell you,
He's just saying, yeah, I like it. All right.
what I will tell you is on any logo that I'm going to work on, you are going to do a bunch of research. And the reason you're doing the research is you want to have reasons for why you make some of the decisions that you make. So, for example, when you first hear the name shark, what's the first shark type you think of?
Yeah. Like great white.
That's what most people. But are there any great whites off of the California coast? Which are the more interesting? Some of the thrasher sharks are far more interesting looking. So you start to do a lot of research on sharks, the varieties, the colors, the patterns. If you look at leopards, we've got so many different kinds of sharks. And the different shapes of the dorsal fins and the different shapes of the tail fins. And so, when you are doing your research, you come across a lot of facts or things that you don't know. When you are looking for Yes, the triangle is, for me, was the best geometric shape to use. I could have used a circle, could have used a square. In fact, the fin that was on the shoulder
Hmm.
uses a circle,
Hmm.
with a wave pattern in it. So, from an artistic standpoint, what I will say is the first thing you're trying to do is solve a visual problem in a way that makes sense. And then as you're doing your research and all those kind of things, sometimes you can begin to merge these things together so that when you sit down to tell people why, because people who aren't artists are going to ask you why. Why'd you choose that color?
Yeah.
Why'd you do that shape? Why'd you do this? And as an artist, I can say it because it makes sense, because it feels right, because of it. But for a lot of people, that's not good enough, right? They want an answer. So sometimes when you create things, you know that you're going to be asked a bunch of questions, and so you have all these written explanations as to why you did what you did. Now, did you plan it that way? Sometimes, and sometimes it's a lucky coincidence. So that is my
Yeah.
explanation to say maybe you're right, maybe you're not. How was that?
That was great. That'll just keep us going. That'll bring us back a whole other time with a whole new batch of questions. Because I mean, I'd certainly love more of your opinions on things of there's diversity in hockey, but also things like that lime green color and maybe that working its way into a blackout jersey or a reverse retro or
Well, here's
all
what
that
we'll do.
stuff.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time. So here's what we'll do. If you guys want to do this again, what I'll do is, we can do another one. But what I will do is, again, I've got all the old logos, I've got all the uniform designs, and we'll do another one, and I'll actually show you a lot of the stuff that, because boy, the last time we did the uniform designs, I probably did, I don't know, there's probably 60 or 70 different uniforms.
Jeez, that's
So
so awesome. Yeah, that
yeah.
would be so much fun for us.
So what you
Absolutely.
can do is you can set it up with your folks, and we'll do a special one, and I'll show them all the stuff that all the rejects and all the stuff that didn't get used, and you guys will get a sneak peek at it.
All
And
right. Yeah, I'll go check with them. Yeah, that's okay.
well, what I'm telling you is I'm not going to check, because if we check with them, they're going to say no. So
No, I'm saying I'll check with my friends who think
oh
if this will be a good. Yeah, I think they'll be all right with it.
yeah, I thought you were going to check like with the league or the Sharks or
No, oh
something.
gosh, no.
They'll go
No,
no. So
I
when they
already
see this,
have
they'll go,
bones to pick with them
what?
over a lot of
Yeah,
jersey designs they do. So no.
yeah.
Uh-uh.
They'll go, what's Terry doing? Why is he? That, and they'll call me and tell me you're crazy. No, you can't show those. But there's some fun stuff in there. I'm sure we can find some things we can show.
Yeah,
Anyway, I
absolutely.
appreciate you guys having me
Yeah.
on, and thanks.
Thank you so much, Terry. Have a great rest of your week. We'll be in touch. And if you want to say goodbye and shout out, I'll leave the mic open for you to do so. If you want to hop, I completely understand. Appreciate all the time you've given us today.
Yeah, I'm sorry that guys, I'm sorry I have to hop today because I got to do another one in about 2 or 3 minutes here. But it was a pleasure having you on, Dan. It's nice to meet you. And if you need me on again, just ping me, and we'll do it again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All
Take
right,
care.
see you guys. Thanks.
Bye.